This chapter deals with socialization, and this is something really easy to see all around us, but sometimes we just don't stop and try to decide how this is happening. When you think about socialization, it really is the how. The definitions of socialization abound. I don't really care which one you get, as long as you get all of the elements within the definitions. If you look at this short one, socialization is how we learn what is needed to function in our society. Now, the real point here are these different areas. Socialization is lifelong. It doesn't stop. It is learned. It's not instinctual. Socialization is in all social interaction, whether it's done on purpose or not. When you think about the smaller groups, think about how groups get new members, whether it be the Boy Scouts or the Hells Angels, and think about the socialization that takes place as those people learn how to function in their groups. Well, from the bigger picture, the same thing is true of society. The three aspects here: culture, society, and socialization. Society, that we already talked about, is the where, remember the geographical location, and it's the who, it's the large group of people. Culture is the what. Culture is what's learned. And socialization is the how. It's the methods, it's the means, it's the way people learn and what the people learn to be able to function in their culture, which allows them to function in their society. If you look at this idea and just remember that this is not something that is instinct. Even if you take an instinct or a reflex, socialization tells us how to channel those instincts, how to deal with those reflexes. Why do you say Gesundheit or God bless you if somebody sneezes? Why do you sneeze into the crook of your arm? Why do some people know how to act in a swimming pool and some people don't? That all tends to be socialization in learning the rules of the culture. Now again, this is the rules of the culture for that society. All societies socialize their people, but they certainly may socialize them into different ways. Remember, we're not as concerned with the personality of the individual. That is often certainly formed from internalizing the norms and values of the society, and that's done through socialization, but our focus is on the larger group. Now, as your book talks about sociobiology, the stories of feral children, etc., I would expect you can read and think about those on your own. The question simply boils down to, is it nature or is it nurture? Now, I kind of tend to lean towards nurture to some extent. When you look at how obvious behavior varies by culture, are there really born criminals? Are women really more emotional than men? It may depend on the culture, it may depend on the socialization. But again, that section I'm sure you can handle on your own. The sociological approaches that the book brings up really are not our focus. For our purpose, just be sure you can recognize the names and kind of the name of the major theory that goes with each one of the folks. Now, you do have to at least know the basics of Freud. I mean, nobody should get out of college and not know Freud. Now, he dies in 1959, and yes, he has been discredited, but his major contribution was talking about the unconscious, about the development of people into the id, ego, and superego. Now, as far as he was concerned, all human behavior was around being able to survive and being able to procreate. The id part was the kid. It was the instinct. It was the immediate gratification. This is what you want as soon as you want it now. Think of the little kid in the store, 2 years old, throwing a temper tantrum. Think of a new baby and learning to talk. Often the first word is no or mine, and that certainly shows up. The third one, the superego, that is shortly speaking, linked to the conscience, to morals, to values and norms that have been internalized. The ego should be the balance between the two. The ego should balance out the superego and the id. You don't want it going too far towards the superego, or you'll have a great deal of repression and a really uptight individual. And obviously, if it goes to the id, then everything is immediate gratification. And someone whose ego is well organized, is well developed, is the adult, is the person who understands rational thinking, who understands a balance, has some fun, but takes into consideration the others around them, and probably most of all understands you can't have it all. Now, Freud has been discredited, but he certainly did stress the importance of childhood and the importance of socialization experiences, and that has stayed with us. Society, in Freud's view, was at odds with the individual, because remember, the individual at first is the id, and that's the one that just wants everything. So much of what Freud talked about was part of the unconscious. Notice my typo there. And this is where we get the phrase Freudian slip, that if you say something by mistake, there's really no such thing, according to Freud. You meant to say that. You slipped to say that. It means something in your unconscious. Now, for the other ones, although I do like these folks, I do have to admit that Gilligan is not my favorite. But certainly the other three are basic folks. But for our purposes, as long as you can link Erikson to the 8 stages, Piaget to the stages of cognitive development, Kohlberg to the stages of moral development, for this class, you do not have to memorize, you do not have to know the various stages. But as you read through that part in the chapter, do take a minute to think about how this is linked to some legal issues in society, especially when it comes from punishment. If someone cannot understand what is right and wrong, so think about Piaget, if someone can't get to the point of empathizing with someone else, think about the stages of moral development, then really, when do we punish someone? According to Kohlberg, the whole point of life was to move from doing something out of fear to doing something out of principle. But again, this is not our focus. Now remember, as we go through this course, psychology and sociology are two sides of the same coin. There's no self-concept, there's no psychology without society. In psychology, the emphasis tends to be on the individual responding to society. Sociology emphasizes the shaping influence that society has on the individual. Now, some of my favorite courses have been social psychology, which obviously go hand in hand. But remember, throughout this course, if you know an exception to a theory or something that we talk about, if you as an individual don't quite fit what the book is talking about, well, that's no big deal. Because we're talking about hundreds and hundreds, in this country, millions of people. We are looking at the big picture, the larger groups of folks. So think about the emphasis throughout this course. Think about emphasizing how society is shaping the individual. We are not negating the individuality of folks, but our focus in this course is on the social aspect. Okay, there's a pretty big hint. Now there is the other term called cultural determinism that says culture determines the type of personality that people develop, that you are going to see certain personality types, certain social types by culture. Now, whether you agree with this or not is certainly up to you. But think of some of the stereotypes that we have. If I say an Englishman to you, what are the first things that come to mind? Stiff upper lip, cold, bad food, whatever it might be. Think about someone who lives in the deep south, in southern Mississippi, as opposed to someone in good old New Hampshire, buried under the snow perhaps. That cultural determinism says these things around the culture determine the type of person. And it may be why we think about the Japanese treating their elderly better than we think about Americans treating their elderly. My personal opinion, I think there's a great deal to be learned here. Now, the social theories are really what we want to focus on from this chapter. And at first, we're talking about the social interactionists. Now, remember, someone who is thinking about social interaction, about true cultural symbols, there's almost no need to explain them because everybody in the culture already knows that. And social interactionists really look at that. They look at the meanings of symbols, of language within the society. Now for us, the two most important are Cooley and Mead. Mead certainly did emphasize to see self in the terms of cultural norms and to see how anyone in that culture would react. And I suggest you read Mead a little more closely as you go through this chapter. Cooley. This guy is my favorite, and I tend to bring this up as we go through the rest of the book. Now again, you don't have to agree with him the most, just realize that I use this one a lot. Now Cooley in the looking glass theory, as was said in the previous slide, really talks about the society being the mirror for individuals. And you really want to be able to give me some specific examples, hopefully personal examples, of how the looking glass theory could be explained using a personal example. Remember, there's 3 steps. A lot of times students forget the third one. When we do something in society, we tend to imagine how we look to the other people around us. And we also tend to imagine how those other people judged us. Of course, we think about how they see us. And then based on that, absolutely no basis in fact, but whatever conclusion we jump to, we develop our own self-concepts. So if we get a positive image in our mirror, we tend to develop a positive self-concept. If we get a negative image in our mirror, we tend to develop a negative self-image. Of course, there's some problems here. Very seldom do we, when we're looking in that mirror, ask the people, right? The people who form our mirror, what they think of us. We don't get factual. We don't try to prove it out. I mean, think about walking into a room, people are talking, as soon as you walk in, they shut up. And our initial reaction seems to be, oh my gosh, they're talking about us. Well, someone who has had a positive mirror throughout their life is probably going to feel, oh, they're talking about me. It must have all been good. Maybe they're planning a party for me, whatever the case might be. Someone with a negative mirror is going to say, oh my gosh, what happened? What's wrong? You know, have I got my pants on? What's going on here? Nobody likes me, etc. Now, in thinking about this theory, I really do like folks to stop and think about it, because the individuals that we use as mirrors can make a huge, huge difference. Think about how you feel when your mirror is your friends, a group of friends that you feel really, really comfortable with. Think of the image that is bounced back to you and how it makes you feel. Now, these are your really good friends, okay? So it should be pretty positive. Then think of a group of individuals that are a different mirror. Maybe it's at your first job, or maybe it's walking into some place where you don't know anybody, you have no idea what to expect, or it's people who knew you years ago and they didn't like you. And think of the image that bounces back that way. Okay? One way to change yourself is to change your mirror. Now, an example I always like to bring up is, have you ever wondered what mirror some people are looking into? Chances are you know someone who in their opinion, in their self-image, they think they are just God's gift to the opposite sex, okay? Or to the same sex. But they just think they're, the best looking, best personality, just wonderful, wonderful people that there ever was. And you're looking at them go, where are they getting this idea? Well, chances are they had a pretty positive mirror. Maybe an overindulgent parent, maybe growing up, everything that they did was praised as wonderful. They got a blue ribbon even if they came in last. Okay, get my drift? Everybody with me on this one? This one is really important to me in a sociological sense, that you understand. Again, you don't have to agree with it, but you have to understand it. If you're not clear on Cooley's theory, please, please, please let me know. Now, we are going to talk about self-fulfilling prophecies a little bit more in the education chapter. And it was brought up primarily by Robert Merton. But Merton really applied Cooley's looking glass theory and came up with the phrase, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And my guess is you've all heard that phrase. Now, in a self-fulfilling prophecy, whatever concept the person, the individual, is seeing in the mirror will become true. It may take a while, but it will happen. A really, really, really true self-fulfilling prophecy is when that concept in the mirror was not true, but it still happens. We see this in education all the time, or in raising little children. I see the results of it in classrooms all the time when students, come to us at this level. But a lot of times a student has been told throughout their school career, or maybe at home, that they're dumb, that they're not going to make it. Don't do anything about going to college because it doesn't matter. You'll never make it. And when you get that mirror, when you get that reflection bounced back enough times, for a lot of people, it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, even when it's not true. Even when it's not true. Okay? Behaviorism, behavior modification, this is aversion therapy, learning how to face fears, really is a little bit more on the sociology side than the psychology side, but that's not our focus for in here either. Everybody all set? We're going to move on to part 2 in a little bit.